The following is intended only for mature audiences.
Open your ears and lube up your butthole. It's time for the What Do We Call It podcast. Now, here's your host. It's Jmann. Welcome to the What Do We Call It podcast. I'm Jmann, and it's just me. And I would like to talk about the Secretary of Health and Human Services, RFK Jr., and all this recent hullabaloo over what they are calling a, quote, Autism Registry. So if you don't know, Robert Fitzgerald Kennedy Jr. Is a man that is kind of a wackadoo who doesn't really believe in science or vaccines, and he discredits well-founded medical information from the standpoint of a conspiracy theorist who's anti-vaccine.
All right, I admit it.
Another thing to remember about him is that they found a dead parasitic worm in his brain, and that it got in there, ate a little bit of his brain, and then died. There might be a correlation. There might not be. I don't know. He also has a very distinct voice that sounds terrible.
I just wanted to say that I've a pretty good RFK Jr. impression that I've been doing. He sounds like someone who is basically wearing a corset and also a cinch on their nuts. Well, a fat woman is standing on their chest, and I don't know, something about the way that he talks just fucking drives me nuts.
It almost hurts my vocal cords to try to do that because he sounds like a 12-pack-a-day smoker. So here's the deal. RFK Jr. has proposed that autism is a preventable medical condition and that it is caused more frequently due to high rates of vaccination and other environmental factors such as toxins in food and water and all those kinds of things. Now, he is proposing it as a hypothesis, obviously, as any scientist would if they were trying to prove or disprove something via the scientific method of coming up with a hypothesis and then testing it under certain conditions and writing down the data, and then trying to recreate the exact same conditions to test it again to see if you get the same data set, and then trying it a third, fourth, fifth, sixth time and slightly altering the conditions each time to see how the end results varied. The idea on its head makes sense because that's how I feel medical professionals would go about trying to prove correlations. But I also want to point out that right now, under this current Trump administration, they are trying to get rid of research facilities and scientists and their data and all kinds of medical study information that is going to be lost if they wipe it out of databases, and that seems batshit crazy. And frankly, I do have to give some minor form of props to Mr. Kennedy Jr. because he is Harvard educated and is an environmental lawyer.
What?
Who has some decent ideas and grasp about the correlation between environmental factors and autism risk. But you also have to remember that if you Google what causes autism, there's things like genetics and preterm birth and advanced parental age and birth complications and stress. These are other factors. It's not just simply one thing. It can't just be vaccines, because there's more than one kind of autism. If it was strictly vaccines and all the kids got the same vaccines, you would think that even though their parents may vary in age, there'd be some pretty steady consistency in the exact type of autism that people have that has become more common now. And frankly, I have to say, as somebody that worked with the developmentally disabled, there are lots of different types of people with disabilities on the spectrum. You know, you used to say people were mentally retarded. Now they just kind of cinch all this shit together under the umbrella of the autism spectrum to some degree or another, and it's kind of a catch-all. But again, focusing on vaccines seems too unilateral in thinking, in my opinion. And he's also said that he's going to figure this shit out by September, and it's like, why would you ever put a fucking countdown clock on research, you dumbass? And years ago, there was a gentleman, a doctor named Andrew Wakefield, who was a part of the Lancet MMR autism study, and he falsely claimed there was a link between the MMR vaccine and autism. And this went on for years before they finally found out that he fudged all the data and made it up, and he had to come clean. And then he basically is now disgraced, and all the people that bought into this bullshit had to be like, whoa, wait a minute, you mean there's not a link between autism and vaccines? Like my ex,
The Beast,
who thought that that was a good reason for us to not get our first child vaccinated. I said, you are fucking retarded. We're getting her vaccinated. And then right after we did, the truth came out about that. But there are still people out there that are stupid enough to think it's a conspiracy and that they're shooting microchips inside of us to track us and all kinds of other things like giving us diseases through vaccines. Even though the rates of the diseases that they're trying to vaccinate us against have gone down, well, the vaccination rates have gone up, and there's correlational data to suggest that it's not fucking bad to get vaccines. There's just some people that are still holding out. And it almost feels like RFK Jr. is one of those people that he's hoping to be like, haha, look, I proved it. They were lying. Just nutcase conspiracy theory bullshit. Because when you look at all of the data that suggests that we basically exterminated these diseases by having high vaccination rates and requirements, and now they're starting to come back, some of them, like this measles outbreak, because vaccination rates are down, because people like RFK Jr. and people of his type or mindset are like, vaccines are bad.
And there's also all the immigrants that don't vaccinate their kids due to cultural differences or fear of being swept up by ICE. Thank you all for bringing back Oregon Trail-era diseases.
If society was able to up the vaccination rate and then basically completely eliminate these diseases, and then we stop giving our kids the shots and the diseases start coming back, I feel like you don't need to be Harvard educated to fucking connect those dots. You feel me? Now, he did do something recently where he's trying to ban certain dyes in foods, and I'm cool with that because some of these dyes have led to links to cancers and other health conditions. So bravo on that one. But then he turns around and he does something like,
I want to just study autism and how it happens and if there's environmental factors involved. And what we're going to do is we're going to take all the information on all the people with autism and we're going to compile it into a database and then study it to see if maybe there's a link between the autism and vaccines.
Which seems stupid because we already have multiple sources and studies that suggest that vaccines are not the cause of all the autism.
Then I did dig into this a little bit, and the problem, I guess, with trying to get all of the collected data of various studies is there's not one source, so people are paying for the information in databases from multiple sources to get the same information, and it would be helpful to have all of it in one spot, you would think, but then you look at this administration and you wonder if there's something more nefarious at play, perhaps, in the long term. Because part of what RFK Jr. has done to get people on his side and make it seem like he knows what the fuck he's talking about is use a bunch of scary, overstated information about, oh, autism rates are up. You look at how 1/4 of all these people that have autism are nonverbal and low functioning and need toilet help for life, and they're never going to write a poem or play baseball or get married or go on date. All this fucking shit making it sound like there haven't always been people with developmental disabilities for as long as time has gone on. Because I seem to remember things like thalidomide and DDT and lead-based paint and unfiltered drinking water, and those led to a myriad of fucking health defects. So it can't just be the shots, because we weren't always doing the shots, right? So we go back to the fact that there's always just some factor of genetics that we don't always get it right. Sometimes you crack an egg and there's 2 yolks in that bitch. And sometimes you crack it open and there's a dead, half-developed baby chicken inside. You see what I'm saying? Not every time that we poop out a kid do we get it right. I mean, look at, like, say, the Elephant Man or Rocky Dennis. That shit just happens. They're genetic defects and disorders. Or you look at Down syndrome. Look at how common that shit is. I don't think we're ever going to be able to figure out how to eliminate that. Now, if you're wondering where I'm going with that in terms of people with disabilities and why I bring up Down syndrome especially, I hate to be another Nazi yelling town crier here, but one thing that the Nazis did is kind of look at science and say, bullshit, let's create our new science and our own ideas on stuff. And when they were rounding up people to exterminate, everybody focuses on they got rid of the Jews and then some blacks and some homosexuals and some gypsies. And one thing that does not get looked at enough is how they started rounding up mentally disabled people or physically handicapped people and other undesirables with birth defects to fucking get rid of them. And they would take them and they'd bring them to hospitals to house them to, quote, study them and determine if their condition could be changed at all or made better. And then eventually they just exterminated these people. So now there's this fear, like, what are they going to do with this autism registry that he's proposing and all this information and who's going to have access and what's going to happen with it? Now, do I think that they're going to go full on fucking eugenics here? I don't think so, because Jesus Christ, that would be way too hard of an overcorrection. But at the same time, I guess if you look at some of Trump's screwer ideas and the fact that he put this man, RFK Jr., in power, you start to wonder, if the elites of society have some plan to start eliminating the undesirables. It starts to look like the elites are trying to make sure that they almost have a master race of the best type of human. And you would think that we would want all humans to be the best, but then you start looking at it like, oh, fuck, this is eugenics. And then you look at like Elon and how he himself has reposted things about autism and sterilization of the autistic. And you start to wonder, like, am I crazy? Or does this seem like maybe they want this information on all these people, and maybe they're going to start with, well, we're trying to help you and figure out what causes it. And then they're going to go, well, if we don't let people with autism reproduce, maybe we can stop more autism from happening. And you go, well, geez, I guess if we have people that have all kinds of mental illness and we don't let them have babies, maybe it'll help with the genetic passing on of the genes of the mental illness. You start to wonder, some of these uber right-wingers that are all yay Project 2025, oh man, are they just going to look at all these conditions as hereditary, and then next thing you know, we don't have the power to stop them from rounding up some of these individuals? Because I got to tell you, I have said in the past, if you look at it pragmatically, objectively, and you take all the emotion out of it, if we were to get rid of the most obese, the most mentally disabled, and the people that are the most medically vulnerable to strengthen society, all of the resources that we expend supporting them to give them a good life could then be used on people that don't have those conditions. However, that is insanely inhuman, and we pride ourselves in the United States on taking care of the lowest of the low and making sure they have a decent quality of life and trying to care about them. And that's people on the liberal, progressive, bleeding heart side of things, or people that just have a fucking conscience, honestly.
Do you know what I am saying?
But it seems like on the right side of the aisle, they just want to save money and get rid of the undesirables. And you look at this registry like, well, if he starts with autism, where does it go from there? Do we then start building an AIDS registry? Do they start building a registry of women that have had abortions in the past? Like, how much of this data do they start to collect in various forms to then squirrel away to use against other human beings? Like, oh, we're going to get rid of all the people that are crazy and fucking hear voices. And you would think, yeah, it's good to get rid of people that are crazy and hear voices, because some of them, medication and therapy will never fix them. And ECT and all this other shit is never going to stop them from being paranoid schizophrenics. But then it's like, well, do we fucking neuter them then? Because what if the paranoid schizophrenia isn't just hereditary? What if there's environmental factors? And then it just turns into this giant nature versus nurture. And I don't know how you just pick one, the way that RFK is doing it, where he's making it seem like,
It's the toxins and everything in our environment and the shots of the things that you're giving your kids. And every time they eat a fucking Uncrustables, they get like a 40% uptick in a chance of developing cancer over the next 34 hours after that. But the next time that you hand your child a Capri Sun, you should be worried about the colors inside of it and how it's making your son's testicles shrink, and it's making all the kids gay, and they're all fucking alphabet people and on the spectrum.
But then I tell myself, well, what if this was back, 12 years ago during one of the Obama administrations? What if this was brought on by the left and they're like, hey, we're going to study this and we're going to try to eliminate some of the factors. Now, the database and the comparison to eugenics and the internment camps and all that shit and the worries about where they're going to go with this, I don't think would be with the left as much as with the right, because people on the left seem to have too much heart and people on the right seem to have no heart at all. So a little bit of political party bias does come into play. And when I did look into how they were going to execute this, I looked at people that thought that it was not the best idea. Primarily, you've got the Autism Self-Advocacy Network, or ASAN, and they're worried about the vagueness of the plan, and namely whether all that data is going to be collected with personally identifying information or not. And then you've got Bob Merrill, who is a managing partner at healthcare strategic planning firm Execulance. Sources on this, that the data collection was likely going to be redundant and a potential waste of funding dollars because similar and often better information already exists in the private sector from multiple vendors. The data from the National Institute of Health that they're creating won't get as many of the most critical subjects that should be addressed, most importantly, the genetic components. So again, now we're back to, let's look at what's coming into play with the parents. You can look at what they've been eating, how much they've been sleeping, what stressors they have, and what the family history is, and whether they've been vaccinated. But you need to look at everything all at once and not just focus on this singular mindset like he's got tunnel vision.
we're going to fix all the autism and we're going to blame it on the shots.
Because really it just looks like he's trying to perform a sense of societal outreach to help people, but it's only going to be self-serving where he tries to aim to stab at,
we need to get vaccination rates down for a while, and we'll study if the autism persists, and then we'll see what I'm saying, that it was the fucking shots all along. It's all you fuckers with your Pfizers and your Johnson & Johnsons and everything else.
But let's just play devil's advocate and just wonder if they start looking at also Down syndrome rates and they want to study these people, or cerebral palsy rates and they want to study these people, and they ask them to come to one centralized location in each state or major city so they can, quote, study them. And then those are also, relatively close to train yards where they can be loaded onto rail cars to a concentration camp where they can learn to think better. Like South Park, concentration camps. You go there to learn how to concentrate, right? It's not like they're going to send a bunch of fucking dudes with Down syndrome that have John Cena t-shirts on and Hi-C fruit punch packs in their hands. And they're going to be like, hey, go in here if you guys want to see a really cool video game. They're like, I like video games. And they all go running in the shed, and then they shut the door and they flip the switch. And next thing you know, they're all huffing and puffing Zyklon B and then dropping dead. And we got a bunch of Corky Nemeks all laying dead in a pile. Because what if we actually need to go the other direction? And we need to study people with Down syndrome to figure out how to, harness their true power. Like, you talk about retard strength. What if we can make a better, stronger, faster retarded person, and then they can use them for, farm labor, and they won't have to worry about the immigrants that they're deporting. And this is the plan all along, is to get a bunch of dudes that love John Cena and girls whose tongues hang out of their mouth and the eye spacing is off, and they go on a farm somewhere and they let them hump each other, and then they take the babies and they raise them while the parents are still out in the fields fucking picking your strawberries for you. And that's how we get the cost of food down. So stay tuned to see if RFK Jr. is going to be able to pull this off by the fall. I'm guessing he's not, and a lot of the brilliant ideas that Trump and his cabal of cabinetry dipshits all bring to the forefront here, is it's going to fall flat on its face and end up being a giant nothing burger. And the whole, what if it's the first key to eugenics and concentration camps? I don't think we're going to go full-blown Nazi Germany here, as much as people with Trump derangement syndrome desperately want it to happen. I just think that it's a misguided effort to promote bad ideology like anti-vaccine mentalities or, say, flat earther bullshit. Interact with the show on Twitter at What Do We Call It? That is at What Do We Call It? You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/group/What Do We Call It podcast show. For the What Do We Call It podcast, I'm Jmann. And that's the end.